everybody. This is Coffee in the Garden. I actually have coffee this time instead of tea because it's still morning time here and it's a little chilly still. The last few days have been warmer, but today it's chilly again. So I'm sporting my very fashionable hand crocheted hat and scarf combo, and my granny sweater, and my little moo for this lovely chat. And because I have kind of like ADHD brain, you'll be very happy to know that I have it written down. So if you see me referencing my hand, it's because that way I can stay on topic. Today we're going to talk about a lot of different things, working on accessible gardens. We're going to talk about determinate versus indeterminate plants. We're going to talk about in-ground versus raised bed, and both of those kind of have to do with accessible gardens as well. We're going to talk about grapes, apples, and cherries. We could talk about pears too. Yeah. Fruit trees kind of all work the same way basically. Talking about what kind of greens you want for your kind of climate. Rainwater catchment. Talk about what to wear in the garden. Obviously this is what I am wearing today. And lastly, who comes in your garden? Do your kids come in your garden? How do you get them involved? Does your husband or spouse or whoever come into your garden? And how do you get them involved, or how do you keep them out? Yeah, so let's just dive right in. All right? Okay. Let's talk about access. I had somebody contact me that wants to start a garden, and they have physical limitations. Everybody has a different set of physical limitations. Maybe you are blessed with no physical limitations, but maybe you know somebody who does have physical limitations and you would like them to still be able to enjoy your garden. And also to consider, like, as we age, our physical limitations become more and more prominent, so having things set up for it to be easier as you age is also a really wise idea as well. So I'm going to start by turning the camera around to show you what my husband did with his raised bed. Now keep in mind, this is the off season. It's a mess. This is real, okay? Right here. So his garden is over there, and he doesn't tend it as much as I do because I'm obsessed with my garden. But his requires less work, and you can see his is raised beds. There's a slide sticking up over there. Yes, I know. And it was covered. This year we will not cover it, but those raised beds were actually produce stands from a grocery store, and then you might be able to see it, I'm not sure. There's also drums from electric dryers used as raised beds in the back of that too. And what he did was he used hugelkultur. So basically he piled a whole bunch of like chunks of wood in the bottom, and then getting smaller and smaller, and then I think he laid some cardboard down. Typically that's how you do it, and then the soil, and that made a great place. Actually, his tomatoes and stuff did pretty darn good over there. For some reason the zucchini didn't, but I think that was lack of watering. But those raised beds worked out really well for him. I have not really a raised bed, but more of a, here, I'll try to turn the camera around again. You know, that kind of funky thing right there, that's my little bed in my garden. That's not in ground exactly, it's just a little bit above ground, and we just kind of piled it in. So if you are looking for access, you need a couple things. You need smooth walkways that are wide enough for whatever mobility aid that you might need. If you're in a wheelchair or walkers or whatever, you want to make sure that the path is wide enough for that. You want to make sure, that it's firm enough as well. There are going to be muddy seasons, and the cheapest way that I keep my feet out of the mud is by using old shingles, and I lay them on the ground on my paths, and that might be helpful if you're on a budget. Just some old shingles that aren't good enough for the roof. You can lay them down for mobility aids, and with the kind of grippy side up, it makes it easier for walking around. Yep, I've got a kid. Let me pause this. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk to the camera now. This is Teresa. She'll be joining us. We were talking about access and talking about in-ground versus raised beds. A lot of times when you are working with access, you want to raise things up. There are certain things that are available on the market if you want to just buy them straight up. There's elevated raised beds where they're lifted up. You don't have to fill the whole thing with sticks or soil or anything. They're raised up a little bit, and then the top part you put all of your growing medium in, right? Yeah. All right. So if height is something that you want to deal with, that's something that you can use. Another thing that I saw was that I was doing a little research too. Yeah. Using the peat pods that have the little netting around them for seed starting can be helpful if your hands lack the ability to grip with security, because it's easier to move them around because the soil won't just fall apart. Determinate versus indeterminate. This is kind of about access and kind of about just in general gardening. Determinate varieties of things like beans and tomatoes and things like that are going to be great for raised beds because they're all going to be a certain height, and so you won't have to do a whole lot of reaching to get to the top or stretching so that you won't have to stand if you're unable to stand. Now if you are planting in ground, then the determinate ones you will have to get down on the ground to get them. So consider that in how you want to set up your garden. Personally, I have found the best results with determinate green beans because I like to can my green beans all at once as much as I can. Yeah, the chickens over there. And indeterminate tomatoes because I like to have my tomatoes throughout the whole season. Yeah, I grow enough plants that usually I have enough to do canning all at once anyway, but I like to have some for fresh eating throughout the season. Yes. Very good. Thank you very much for that input. The chickens are over there. They're very happy, aren't they? Since I have a kiddo here, why don't we talk about how to get your kids involved, and then I'll come back to the other things like the fruits and the greens for your climate and rainwater and all of that. Since I've got her with me, I might as well, okay? When they're babies, you get them involved the same way that you get everybody involved, get them involved with anything else. Baby wear, do things when they're napping, bring them out once they're able to, sit out there, and just don't worry about the dirt. Babies are washable, and little dirt don't hurt, right? And then once you've got kids that are old enough, to walk around and to understand the word no when it comes to pulling things out, just let them in. I teach my kids that they need to close the gate, and I am very, 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 very serious about it, and I will frequently go up and check on it because kids forget. They just do. But that's my only real rule, is that you have to close the gate, and you can only pick things if it's ripe. But my kids are involved with gardening even from the youngest age that they can be. This little one helped fill the dirt into the soil into my little planting pots. Yeah. And sometimes they can even help with watering. Yeah. Uh-huh. And at this age, mostly it's like sampling and broadening their palate that way. You got a lot to say today. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have a hat on. Kids as young as 3, depending on the maturity of your kid. This is all going to depend. Your kid's different than mine. My 3-year-old, I would trust her to pick weeds, but I would be willing to sacrifice a few important things if they accidentally got picked, like carrot tops. They might get plucked. Yeah, you have your toes stuck in there, huh? It keeps them warm. You don't have any shoes on, so you gotta stay here. Okay. I send my 7 and 8-year-olds around with an organic pest control solution. It's like neem oil and things like that to spray our corn to get the earwigs off. And so that was my oldest's job last summer, was to spray the corn bits with the sprayer. It had some neem oil and stuff, and it's not going to hurt them. So, and I don't use chemicals and artificial stuff in my garden. So I feel comfortable letting my kids do that. Mm-hmm. Teaching your kids how to water, making sure that they understand that a certain amount of water is good, too little is not enough, and too much will wash the plants away. Okay. Shh, shh, shh. Yeah. Kids can get involved no matter what. If you are concerned about production. Yeah. Yeah. If you're concerned about production of your garden, you're worried that your kids are just going to come and pick it all, maybe set up a small garden that is just for them. We've done that in the past. We've gotten some buckets from Dollar Tree and put some, actually I did the bottom with crushed up soda pop cans so that it was enough room for drainage, and then just the top with dirt. And they planted whatever they wanted, and if it died, it died. And if it succeeded, then they were super happy. So that's a lot of good options for getting your kids involved. As far as husbands, they just have to see what good food comes out of it, and then they'll jump in. It might take a season or 2, yeah, but then after that, they'll be making their own raised beds over there. Do you want to play on the ground? Do you want to play on the ground? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of greens you want for, we're going to come back to the fruits because that way I can keep her in my sight here while I go over the other things. What kind of greens do you want for your climate? I live in Iowa, and even though it's a northern climate, what happens is our temperatures are like low, 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 and then suddenly they like skyrocket, and they're so it's very frustrating to try to grow something that likes to bolt. That means go to seed. Lettuce. Yeah, that's a rabbit poop. Let's not play with that. That's a rabbit poop. Aki. Yeah, can you get a leaf? There you go. Okay. Lettuce is really hard for me because it likes to bolt. And so I focus on more of the hardy greens, especially kale. Kale has a great growth pattern here in Iowa. And yes, that's another rabbit poop. Aki. Let's not pick up the rabbit poops. Can we pick up a leaf instead? Can you find a leaf? No more rabbit poops, just leaves. Kids are gonna get messy. A little dirt don't hurt. All right. Yeah, Aki. Okay, get a leaf. See the leaf right there? Good job. So depending on where you live, If it gets really hot really fast or stays really hot for a long time, you're going to want something a little hardier. Consider things like collards, consider things like Swiss chard, consider things like kale, anything that's green but thicker. If it's cooler where you live, then lettuce might be a good choice. Yeah, that's a leaf gall. Yeah, that one's okay to look at. Oh, interesting. Explaining to the kids as they find it in the garden is a great way to get them involved. Explaining what a leaf gall is, for example. That's a little bug's house, but they're sleeping now. It's too cold for them. Yeah. No matter what kind of greens you choose, it's going to be great to keep them in a slightly cooler area. If you have taller plants like corn or tomatoes or pretty much anything that grows up higher, you can plant them on like the north side of that so that they get a little less sun exposure and they're less likely to bolt. Let's see. Let's talk about clothing, just because it's fun. Wear whatever the heck you want. Wear whatever the heck you want. You can wear anything you want in your garden. I go from church straight to my garden right after church. I barely even go in the house. I send one of the kids in for some hot dogs. They bring them outside during the summer, and we cook some hot dogs after church. And I went out here in my dresses and my usually whatever shoes I wore, and still got my lipstick on and everything else. So you can wear whatever the heck you want in your garden. If you want to make sure that it's easy for you, something with good knees is good. Something that's not gonna, blow your skirts up when the wind blows the wrong way. But wear whatever the heck you want in your garden. I'm out here in my pajamas half the year, and that's fine. If anybody looks over into your garden and is offended by what they see, they deserve it for peeking into your private area. So wear whatever you want. The only other thing that we've got before I talk about the fruits is rainwater. So I'll show you what my setup looks like. Let's see if we can get it in there. All right. Ta-da! This is my rainwater catchment system. I have an elevated barrel and a lower barrel. And what I have set up is that the upper barrel catches the rainwater from the edge of my roof. And then there's a hose hooked up to this spigot. It's not right now because it's winter. But the hose will hook up to that spigot and then coil around and land on the top of the bottom bucket. And so then I use the bottom bucket for my water, and I use an electric pump, an electric transfer pump, to actually pump the water at a great enough speed that I can set a sprinkler up. But then I want the bottom barrel to be refilling as I'm using it, so I just open up the tap on the top barrel and it flows down and refills the bottom barrel as I'm using the water from the bottom barrel. Because the reason you need a transfer pump, or the reason I have a transfer pump, is because gravity fed only works if you have gravity working with you. And my garden area is pretty dang flat. So gravity doesn't really help me here. Do you want to come up here, baby? Oh, we're getting cold? Are you getting cold? Hands cold? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go in the house?
Yeah.
While I come out and explain the fruits? Oh, you want me to come in?
No.
Do you want to go in the house?
No.
No, you want to stay out here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like it here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the video here, and I'll come out when this little one is no longer busy in my lap, and I'll explain, oh, is it cold? And I'll explain fruit trees and grapevines. Can you say bye-bye to the camera? Bye-bye. Okay, we'll be back in just a few. wanted to show you a wide angle of my apple tree and my grapevines before I brought you in closer. I'm going to split in a little picture of what my apple tree used to look like when I moved here, and unfortunately I don't have an old picture of the grapevines, but it's about the same as the apple tree. So here's the split in picture. So as you can see, it was massive, and we've been slowly working on getting the tree back down to a manageable size where it produces better. So I'm going to come closer and tell you more about it. Okay, so here's my apple tree. And when we moved to this home a few years ago, it was massive. I'd say at least 3 stories tall, and it was giving us fruit, but the apples were small and they were covered in bugs, and so and the tree itself was not in very good condition, but I am always wanting to make sure that we use our resources wisely. So this one branch that's kind of, let's see, right there. All right, that branch is basically dead, but we let the kids swing on it, and yeah, we may eliminate it at some point, but the thing is that the tree has grown like this so much that it kind of needs some kind of a counterbalance weight. So we have had to, in stages, take this tree down to a much more manageable size. It's a Macintosh apple tree, which is my husband's favorite. And so we don't want to just get rid of it and plant a new one. We want to use what we have. So we've been using techniques to slowly bring it back down to a manageable size while increasing the size and the quality of the fruit, while slowly making less of the small fruits. So you either get a whole bunch of little apples that are hard to use, or a smaller amount of larger apples that are easier to use, and that's what we would prefer. So we cut off a back limb here first because it was not producing much and it was going right under a bunch of pine trees and just not doing well. It was throwing everything off balance, and we wanted to get rid of that. The next part that we cut off, I'll kind of angle this, right up there by that rope. We cut that off because it was stretching out way far over the yard and it just wasn't producing very much, and anything that we could pick, it was up so high we just couldn't manage it, plus it was being diseased. Woodpeckers have had their way with it, and sapsuckers and all sorts of stuff. The next ones that we cut off were right up there. Again, because of the height. Now it's been, I think, 2 years since we cut those off, and you can see, I'll bring it back up, that there are some branches growing up straight from there, but they are within reach with our apple picker. And so we're happy to let those stay and allow them to start being the fruiting branches. There's also another branch starting to grow from the base of this trunk right here and shooting upwards right there, and that one's going to be producing some apples as well. Basically, it's slowly chipping away until it is the size that you want, but if you cut more than 1/3 of the tree off at a time, you're going to kill the tree. So we have left this branch, which is ridiculously long and tall and stretches up high, because we didn't want to kill the tree and make it give up. We wanted to give it a chance to produce those apples. Last summer when we went to pick apples, we went ahead and just chopped off a part of that, so it was even longer. We went ahead and just chopped off part of that so that we could pick the apples from the ground. And slowly the tree is learning that it can't grow out that far. It has to try to send up new shoots closer to its core. And so that's our goal with our apple tree. There's an old saying that you should be able to throw your hat through an apple tree and not hit a branch. And that's so that it gets the proper amount of air circulation, sunlight, and everything else. So if your branches are really close together, you need to prune some of those down so that you can have space in between. The same goes for other fruit trees like cherry trees and pears. If you see branches that aren't producing, cut them off. For heaven's sakes. Somebody just laid an egg. If you have a branch that's not fruiting, cut it off and it'll shoot up a better branch. I know how she feels. It'll shoot up another branch that'll produce more fruit. If you take the energy out of the crappy branches and send it to the good ones, that's good. Yes, I know, girl. You did a good job. Good job. All right. So, apple trees, cherry trees, and pear trees are the ones I have personal experience with. My cherry tree's in the front. It's just a baby. And it's going to need a little bit of pruning, so I'll bring you over there real quick and show you how we prune a cherry tree before it gets to this completely unmanageable state. All right, come along with me. Okay, so I'm here in the front, and this is my cherry tree that's new from last Mother's Day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be pruning it down to a state that is manageable. Now it has already started to bud out a little bit. Ideally you do this before this happens, but it'll be fine. Now make sure you have some nice sharp clean clippers, and I do not want this to grow straight up tall, so tall that I can't manage to pick it. I want to make sure that it's being pruned out to be kind of like globes shaped. So I'm going to go ahead and lop it off right here.
This won't fall.
Don't touch that, please, Margaret. No. So we chopped off this end of the cherry tree, and this can just be composted in the yard. And then what you want to make sure of is that none of the branches are crossing over each other. Just a minute, Margaret. So you just want to make sure none of the branches are crossing over each other so that they have enough space in them for air to flow through. So that's how you manage trees when they are new. All right, let's get you back to the grapevines. All right, this is my little arbor with some grapevines on it that was here when we moved in. Just like the other things, it was not managed well, and so we're slowly working on it to get it back to a good producing level. We got enough grapes last year to can maybe a gallon of juice, about that. And that was the second year of working on it. So this year it should produce even more. And I'll show you how to prune back a grapevine so that you can get the best amount of grapes. And please remember that I'm dealing with something that was very poorly managed. Well-managed grapevines don't look like this. They're much more uniform and high yielding. This is more of a something somebody threw in and kind of neglected through different owners, and now we're just bringing it back to some sort of functionality. So I'll bring it closer so you can see what I'm going to be doing. So this is a good example of different years of growth. This right here was this past summer's growth. This right here was the summer previous. And this was what it came from years back. This is the original, and you can see how it's flaky and stuff. Now if you want to start almost new, you're going to need to cut it off somewhere around here. You want a couple nodes, which are these little bumps left on it. But either way, you're going to cut it back to a manageable size. So when we first started, we cut it back to what we felt was a manageable size and a manageable shape. And then the year following, this came out. And then after all of that, then the last February, then we cut it down right here so that out of this node, a new branch would form. And so now, this was last summer's. Grapes produce on that year's, you're going to want to leave last year's on just enough that there's a few nodes on each. So what I'm going to be doing is counting maybe 3 or 4 nodes and trimming it off after that. So 1, 2, 3, and then just out of view here is number 4. So I'll get my trusty little guys out and just lop it off carefully so I don't pinch myself. The best time to do this is late winter, early spring, before the buds start to show. And then we're just gonna pull all of this out. And toss it on the ground to compost. So I go around and I do that. I find the stuff that's from the last summer's growth and I cut it off. And you can see it's still green in there, still alive. You want to do this before spring really hits, because otherwise it'll drip all of its sap out and be a very unhappy grapevine. Now, if you discover that you're cutting it a little late, what you can do is get some wax, and you can put wax, like candle wax, on it and help it to heal up a little bit so that the sap doesn't drip out quite as much. So that's an option. So I'll go and trim some of this up, and I'll probably put it on super speed there so that you can see me. My lips are going numb. It's kind of cold out today. Now that I've gotten a lot of it trimmed down, what I'm going to do is train it. So I'm going to be using some zip ties and bringing the stuff that's up high down lower, because it's going to grow up high during the summer. I want to start it as low as possible so that I can reach it as best as I can, because when we first got these grapevines, and when we first got the house and we checked these grapevines, they were 30 feet into the pine trees above them. So I'm going to zip tie them down so that they're a more manageable spot, and then I'll bring you back when I'm done, because I'm running out of space on my phone for the memory. So I'll just bring you back when I'm done zip tying them down in a more manageable spot, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so I've got it all zip tied. I'll take you closer, but you can see the general shape of it. Kind of swoops up and wraps around. I wanted to take my best producing vines and just bring them down closer to my level. So I've got a nice mess of zip ties holding it there, and I've got another one bundling it there, some over here and some over here, and everything's pretty much at a level that I could reach. And and my kids are back here hanging out with me.
Your bike.
Say hi.
Hi.
So I've got the grapevine all wrapped up and ready for spring. All right, so that wraps up a coffee in the garden episode. One of my hens is mad at me because I stole the eggs from underneath her, but there ain't no rooster there, so she was just wasting her time. All right, so I hope that was a fun episode for everybody. I hope you learned a little bit. There's a lot of different methods of pruning and things like that. We're all just doing the best we can with what we got. Before you prune, make sure you check and double check the way you want to do it. If you have someone local that knows what they're doing, bring them over. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next week. Hopefully it's warm enough to go without a coat next week. Hope spring's eternal when it comes to spring. God bless y'all, and we'll see you later.